Man, Thor is so cool, but isn't he kind of overpowered? I mean, it seems like
He's
he's never met a problem he couldn't hammer until it went away. Hasn't he ever struggled? Well, my sweet little sailor on the seas of mytho
Like
history,
Vegeta, dog,
the
you know?
answer is no, not really. But this one time,
Not really.
kind of. Little bit. From a certain point of view, our story begins with Thor and Loki traveling to visit the confusingly named Jotun king Utgard-Loki, no relation to regular Loki, for unspecified reasons, but not before a quick side trip where they grab dinner with a local peasant family. Unsurprisingly, the family's not super well equipped to feed Thor, but luckily Thor always keeps an emergency snack.
This story is kind of like another mythological story where Hermes and Zeus were kind of wandering around and wandered into these random people's home and ate dinner with them. They're kind of like similar at this point in the thing, which is kind of weird because these religions are practiced very far away from each other.
On his person for just such an occasion, by which I mean he slaughters one of his chariot-pulling goats for the peasants, but tells them to save the bones and wrap them in the skin overnight, since it'll let him bring the goat back to life in the morning, which kind of implies he does this a lot. That's gotta be rough on the goat. They share a hearty meal, but the peasant's son,
sure.
Thialfi, cracks open one of the goat bones for that tasty marrow. You know, I never saw the appeal. It's just like goop. Blood-producing goop. That feels like the ickiest part of the animal to... Okay, never mind. Point is, the bone is broken, so the next day when Thor resurrects the goat, it's acquired a sudden limp. Thor is pretty cranky, but as payment for the goat, the peasant offers him his children, Thialfi and Röskva, as his servants. And Thor seems to consider this a decent trade, so he mellows out and they move on. So Thor and Loki, plus these two random kids, continue on their way, resting for the night in a weird cave-like building they find in the middle of the woods. But when the sun rises and they head outside, they find the biggest giant they've ever seen sleeping nearby. This giant is named Scream.
I guess the son did break the bone, so like you probably should just give him your son because it's like this motherfucker almost got murdered by this literal god. So like, what the fuck?
Which they learn when he wakes up, greets them, and asks them what they were doing inside his empty glove. That's a big dude. So they have breakfast together, and Screamer offers to carry their food for them. And when they rest for the night, he tells Thor he can take whatever food he wants from his bag. This is pretty nice of him, but somehow the bag is tied way too tightly to the point that not even Thor can open it. Thor's already pretty hangry, so he doesn't take this very well and wallops the sleeping Screamer in the head. Instead of the anticipated outcome, aka Screamer dying, he wakes up, asks if a leaf landed on his head, and goes back to sleep. That's already a pretty sizable blow to the ego, but to make things worse, Screamer snores like a continental subduction, and Thor tries hitting him 2 more times throughout the night with just as little effect. One very sleepless night later, Screamer tells the gang they should probably turn back and abandon their journey to see Utgard-Loki, but if they're determined to visit him, they definitely shouldn't brag about their abilities, because not only is Utgard-Loki even bigger and stronger than Screamer, so are all of his Thanes, and they definitely won't be impressed. With that, Screamer leaves, and the gang continues to Utgard-Loki, because Odin didn't raise no quitter, but he definitely raised a fool or two. So the gang arrives at the fortress of Utgard-Loki, which is unsurprisingly really big to accommodate the really big giants that live there. Continuing the humiliation conga line, Thor finds the massive gate is too heavy for him to open, but on the plus side, they're comparatively small enough to fit between the bars, so they get in and approach the truly enormous Utgard-Loki. Utgard-Loki is unimpressed, as Screamer suggested he would be, and tells the gang that he doesn't let just anyone stay at his fortress. All his visitors need to be very exceptional in at least one way, so if they want to stay, they're gonna need to prove themselves. So Loki steps up all like, "You want exceptional? Well, no one can eat faster than me." And Utgard-Loki's like, "Unorthodox display of hubris, but very well," and brings out the also confusingly named Logi, not to be confused with either of the Lokis in this story, and sends him a big trough full of meat for...
I was literally just thinking about it. I was like, so this guy's Utgard-Loki, and this is Loki, the god of mischief. And then this guy's Logi, and then that's way too many L-O names
for the two of them to go at. Loki and Logi demolish the trough with terrifying efficiency and meat in the middle. But where Loki effectively ate all the meat off the bones on his side, Logi ate the meat, the bones, and the trough. Logi 1, Loki 0. So next up, Thialfi says he's the fastest runner he knows, and Utgard-Loki's like, "Challenge accepted," and calls up this guy Hugi. Hugi and Thialfi race, but Hugi keeps beating him by ridiculously wide margins, though Utgard-Loki does admit Thialfi's the best runner they've had in a while. Hugi 1, Thialfi 0. Röskva, I guess, doesn't want to participate in this Hammerskap measuring contest, so next up is Thor, who says he'd like to participate in a contest of drinking. On brand, I like it. So Utgard-Loki pulls out a big drinking horn and tells Thor that most of his Thanes can finish it in 1 drink, the rest take 2, and nobody's pathetic enough to need 3. So Thor takes the biggest swig he can manage and barely makes a dent. 2 hearty swigs later, the level's visibly lowered, but he's nowhere near finished. Thor
That's
0,
crazy.
drinking horn 1, and Utgard-Loki asks if he wants to try something else instead. So Utgard-Loki's like,
Well, I never would have suggested this to the mighty Thor if he hadn't just proved himself to be a colossal wuss, but how would you like to try picking up my cat?
So Thor tries to
That's
pick up the cute kitty, but it does that cat thing where it goes all liquid. It just stretches and stretches, so by the time Thor's got it all the way over his head, only one of its paws is off the ground. Thor 0, cat 1. So by now, Thor has had a really trying day. He's hungry, he's
Imagine playing with somebody that he plays you in like 55 different games, and in every single game he's got like a trick deck of cards or trick dice or whatever it is. Like literally has the advantage every single time because he's playing with nothing but magic items.
cranky, he's embarrassed, and he really wants to fight something. So for his final challenge, he asks to wrestle someone. And the bad day gets worse when Utgard-Loki brings out a diminutive old lady as his sparring partner and takes a dive into terrible territory when she kicks his ass. Thor 0, Grandma 1. So Utgard-Loki stops the match and
Thor
offers
just
the gang
keeps
hospitality.
getting
Even though
whooped,
they lost
dog.
every challenge, I guess their sheer protagonisty gumption impressed him, or maybe it's just regular pity. They eat, drink, party, and sleep, and the next day, Utgard-Loki escorts them outside the fortress to see them off, and privately says,
Look, guys, I'm gonna level with you. You're never coming back here because I seriously underestimated you and you nearly ruined everything.
So basically, Utgard-Loki is a huge prankster and powerful illusionist who just kind of wanted to screw with them by giving them impossible tasks they were guaranteed to fail at, which is a pretty classic fairy tale format. But Thor is so freaking powerful that he kept nearly killing him or destroying very important parts of the planet in his efforts to succeed. The trouble started when Screamer found them in the woods. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Screamer was Utgard-Loki in disguise, and he cast some illusions on Thor, so when he tried to hit him in the head, he was hitting nearby mountains instead, incidentally leaving huge squared-off valleys wherever he swung.
That's
Already pretty
crazy,
unsettling for the
dog.
trickster. The ravenous Logi that managed to out-eat Loki was actually a raging wildfire.
This guy's like, he's not evil, so he's not trying to cause a bunch of damage. He's just trying to like troll people, you know what I'm saying? He's just a troll, a real life troll. And so Thor and Co kept almost beating him, and they were winning impossible tasks, and the consequence for winning impossible tasks is like catastrophe. You know what I'm saying?
And the speedster that beat the Alfie in a foot race was the personification
He's like,
of
I gotta
thought,
give
both
up.
obviously
Can't do this
unbeatable in their respective fields. The drinking horn Thor failed to empty was actually connected to the ocean, which is clearly undrinkable, but through his valiant efforts to get drunk, he managed to lower the world's water level several feet. This is the first time Utgard-Loki was like,
Oh balls, I might be in over my head.
that cat he couldn't pick up was his legendary enemy, Jormungandr the Midgard serpent, and the fact that he managed to dislodge even one paw was very, very dangerous for the integrity of the world overall. And the old
Facts,
woman
that's
who
what
beat
I'm
his
saying,
ass was
dog.
old age, and the fact that he managed to fight her even a little was pants-browningly freaky
That's
for old
crazy.
Utgard-Loki. So with that cat out of the bag, Utgard-Loki tells them to never come back because Thor is just way too OP, and if they try, he'll protect his castle with more illusions and make it totally unfindable. Thor reacts
So
by
you
pulling out
lose,
Mjolnir to beat some
but,
catharsis
like,
out of him, at which point Utgard-Loki and the castle both vanish.
Only
And that's
because
the story
it
of how
was
Thor had a
impossible
very
to actually
embarrassing long
win.
weekend full of failure and disappointment, but somehow came out of it cooler and more validated in the eyes of both himself and the world. 'Cause you had a bad day, you